Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's selection comes at us from a person from Germany. Hey, Bryan, please have a go at Andrii Barmalii with the track Ja Normalno. Literally, I am normal, but when asked, how are you? In Ukrainian, it is the common way to respond in the sense of, I am fine. There are no lyrics to this track. Alright, so let's dive into this, see what's going on with this, and I don't recognize any of this, so I have no expectations. Let's check it out. Breakbeat with saxophone? An atmospheric bassy synth? A bit of darkness to the music. Those short stops. Dude, the hi-hat work off onto the left side. Interesting coloring us out of the lines. Very clever transition. Almost sounded like glitching, but hand played that way. I'm curious if that ending, everything after the breakbeat stops, if that's part of the studio version or something specifically created for the music video. Yeah, this was wildly entertaining, and it's definitely something I think that has depth to it in a manner that I would gain more out of it by listening to it multiple times, but I think primarily with slowing it down. There's a lot of passages in there where the harmonic component fluctuates rapidly, and I'd love to hear them with a little bit more time to feel them rather than the quick, gloss into this different emotion and then slip back to where we were in the fraction of half of a second, which is what happens often during those fast runs. There's some really interesting note choices in there that I can't pick up at that speed. The the purpose and the complexity of them. I can hear that he's coloring outside the lines, picking notes outside of the chord that we're in at the moment. But I can't, because of how fast it is, I can't pick up why we went in that direction. What specifically he wanted to pull into it. Um, let's start with technique. I'm an aerophone player myself. Some of you might know I play trumpet. Played classical trumpet, played jazz trumpet. My heyday, I might have been able to play some of the faster stuff on here. But the thing is, and what's really interesting, we don't talk about this too often outside of classical music. Even jazz allows for a little bit more expression, but I think what's interesting here, and maybe this is part of an improvisational expression, is playing the right notes correctly. We listen to a lot of rock and metal on this channel, and for the most part, because of all the effects that go on between the physical guitar and what comes out of the amp, how you play the guitar doesn't really change much about the core timbre or the sound of the instrument. But with an acoustic instrument, there's a lot of stuff that goes into creating specific tones, creating specific sounds, creating specific articulation to a phrase. During those fast runs, there's a lot of nuance to them. Some notes are slurred, some notes have a rigid stop between them. Some even have more attack than others, having more of an accentuation or impact at the beginning of the notes, even though they are moving rather quickly. There's nuance to all of them. The passage moves too fast for me to say this with any sort of, what's the word I want? You just have like confidence. Yeah. But there are certain passages in here where I feel like repeated phrases generally feel the same every time through, which means that each note has a unique articulation to it. That is to say, if you were to put this on sheet music to be notated and transpose it, that these 16 notes are going to have specific symbols on each note to let you know how you should be playing it, and that those symbols are going to be the same every time through that 16 note passage. That is impressive to play at this speed with this type of repetition, to have that accuracy over and over. Now, two things come into question with this. One, there is a hard break between each group of 16 notes. It is not a constant flurry of sound. There is a break between note 16 and 17, or note 1 of the repetition. There's a break there of sound, which means the 16th note is not fully resonating. Now, unlike a guitar, that, well, no, even a guitar, if you palm mute it, you stop the sound, but the sound waves are still going out there. So yeah, even on a guitar, this would be a production trick to stop that sound entirely there. Now, here's where this comes into question about performance, and it makes me wonder how this is performed live. Because that break could imply copying the recording of that and then pasting it multiple times after, which is probably how the studio version was handled. That break might have been a happenstance of the recording process, or it might have been planned from the beginning. I don't know. I'm not going to look into that and make any sort of guess about that. The end result is something that feels very segmented, which I think is interesting given the fluidity and the constant flow of notes coming out of the saxophone in many of these non-melodic sections. Non-linear melody? We're going to go with that. The loop sections feel broken up and fragmented despite it constantly being this flurry of notes coming at the listener. I find that to be a really interesting juxtaposition. But like I said, it also creates a very unique situation of being able to copy paste this phrase without losing that leftover reverb from the previous passage, which is usually a telltale sign that you've copy pasted. But here it works. It adds a flavor to it all and actually creates a rhythmic pulse to it. It allows the 16 notes to be grouped up into singular phrases rather than be felt as a larger passage. But it also makes me wonder about live performance. Now, this is a music video. There is a chance that he wasn't even playing in the footage. That's just how music videos get made. But I wonder if he plays this live and what technique he uses to achieve this. Is there a backing track that allows him to take breaths when he needs to? Does he employ circulatory breathing, which the camera work was very rapid and chaotically cut in this, so it was tough for me to see, but I didn't see any puffing out of the cheeks in order to achieve the circulatory breathing process. There is no place to breathe in this, though. For 40, 50, 60 seconds at a time, the sax is just going non-stop 16th notes. So, like I said, it brings in a lot of questions. I'm curious how the recording process went, how they landed on that stark pause in between each of the phrases, the 16 groups of notes, the group of 16 notes, but also how it's performed live. I can't really infer any of that from the music, but they are little details I picked up that had me questioning some of the process of recreating this and even creating it. But the end result, which I think is ultimately more important, is that it does feel frantic. Constant 16th notes out of a saxophone, out of any aerophone instrument, I feel will always feel more energetic, more engaging, more tense than out of a string instrument. Granted, there is still an element of endurance. You can't just, not anybody could just pick up a guitar and constantly play 16th notes on it, playing some black metal or death metal or something like that. There's still skill to that. You still have to build up your chops. But when it comes to aerophone, it's not just about playing fast. It's not just about playing precisely. It's not just about the articulation of each note. You also have to worry about breathing because, if you pass out, you can't perform anymore. So you have to make sure you're getting the air that's necessary too. And so, like, that psychological component of this person is kind of prioritizing a very necessary component. Well, they're prioritizing their art and musicianship over a necessary component of life. Just to breathe. It's something we do without thinking about it. And I apologize. Now you're probably thinking about breathing, and that's very uncomfortable. Now I'm doing it too. But anyways, it's such a natural part of life. We don't think about it. And this person is engaging sort of counterproductively to life. It's I don't know, something about this has always been really engaging to me, and I've talked about something similar to this even going back years ago with Colin Stetson when we checked out The Love It Took to Leave You and the circulatory breathing process that goes on for that performance. It's just it blows my mind and it adds this extra layer to things. It makes things more intense, but interestingly, it works really well here. Not because of what the saxophone is doing in isolation, but because of what else is going around it, which is the break beat. This is a very intense, engaging, high energy drum pattern. Lots of hi hat, bass kick, snare, plenty of notes going on. The drums are getting hit so many times per beat. It is engaging. It also is very intense though. It feels like I'm hyper. I have too much energy and I need to run around the house like I'm 5 and just had some fun dip or something like that and chucked out the stick and just, chugged the sugar powder. Breakbeats always feel like that to me. But to pair that with the high intensity of the saxophone playing is perfect. It is an amplification of that feeling. In a sense, this is high energy. But in another sense, you add in the tension to it all and it feels anxious. It feels like somebody possibly strung out, not knowing what to do next, but very antsy, ready to move on to the next step and not being able to. Like knowing you only have 10 minutes until you have to leave for an appointment of some sort. That's not enough time to start anything, but you also really can't leave yet. And you're just in this moment of limbo and you're really ready to go. And you're just staring at the time and the ticking so slowly. The song is that frantic feeling of being in that sort of limbo. And I think even if we had just the drums and the sax, I would feel that. But there's another component to this, and I think it's interesting because this is really the last instrument here. This is just a 3-piece set for a majority of the time. We have atmosphere. We have a synth, low bassy one, providing root tones and chords throughout. They set the atmosphere and the emotion for a lot of this outside of the concept of speed. And I find this to be interesting. It's dark, brooding almost at times. It's very moody. I wouldn't say that it's eerie or scary, but it's definitely not bright. It's not positive. It's unnerving, even at times. I think also leaning into this is that the other two instruments, the main focus, I think, in the production is high intensity movement. And the synthesizer's just here in the corner holding out these notes, droning on. What is it they know that the other instruments don't? Why are they content with sitting still? Something about that feels weird. It feels off. It makes the whole thing even darker for me. It all comes together into something that is just very unsettling at the worst times and very intense and anxious at the other. There are a couple of bright moments in it, however. I talked about the saxophone player, particularly during the solo sections. Once we got away from those ostinatos, those short loops, and we got into more linear style melody playing, the saxophone player likes to take notes from outside of the chord and explore other moments. They're here and gone quickly, blink and you miss it type of playing. It's why I mentioned I'd love to hear this slowed down. Maybe even if I could just get some sheet music to throw into Muse score and kind of explore each chord and allow it to resonate. Not each, well, the chord technically with like the synth underneath and then the notes on top. But even just taking a group of a couple notes at a time and chunking them together and kind of hearing how all of it works condensed rather than strung out as a series of notes. But there's a couple of notes I think that kind of stuck out to me. It featured a bit of positivity. This was also in the solo section where we introduced more space to the performance, having stops, rests, which is the proper term in music for when you don't play, having some of them in the music as well. It almost feels as if the saxophone here is trying to force the song into something less chaotic, less intense, less driven, less anxious, trying to introduce moments of less sound, moments of more positive harmony. Even the phrases start to get squashed down a little bit. A little 4-note lick, a little 5-note lick, some space between those, instead of the constant run-on sentence the sax has been playing up until here. Like I said, it feels like a conscious effort to change the feeling of the song. It doesn't work, though. Any attempt is futile, as the wonderfully paced and played solo section changes nothing. At the end of it, we return back to the frantic the frantic sax work, and it's dark and eerie and tense all over again. Any of those harmonic attempts to change the feeling, the atmosphere of the song, forgotten in the past, left to be just part of that solo section and not returned to in the main loop, the A section. I think it's interesting then that the song is titled I'm Fine as a response to how are you doing, because everything about it feels not. It's almost as if this is the mask and we get to see behind it. I don't understand Ukrainian culture. I have zero experience with it, but it doesn't sound too different than, well, almost American. Someone asks, "Hey, how you doing?" "I'm doing fine. How are you doing?" "Doing fine too." The words don't really mean anything. Even if you're not doing fine, you're going to say that. It's just the phrase you say when you start to meet someone, see someone for the first time, or you've decided, hey, 3 o'clock, we're gonna go get lunch together. 3 o'clock rolls around, you walk into the sub place, and like, hey man, how you doing? Doing fine. How you doing? Fine too. And then you start your conversation. It's more of a formality than an actual information being delivered. And so even though you might say you're fine, you're not. This is the chaos that you're holding inside, because it's not really culturally acceptable to break down in the middle of a subway and say my life sucks, the world around us is falling apart, I can't deal with the stresses anymore, and can you believe what's about to happen in politics? And so you say I'm fine. And that's kind of what the song feels like to me. I like it now. See it from this perspective. I mean, I liked it originally too. It's impressive, and the atmosphere is great. But I mean, to really connect with it in this way, I wasn't expecting to. But I wonder if that's what they're aiming for. The chaos underneath the lie, or maybe the truth underneath the lie. I don't know. These are my thoughts on Andrii Barmalii's Ja Normono. That's really hard to say, and I feel like I'm saying that with more of a Spanish inflection, but I did my best. I hope it was good. What do you think of this track, though? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you just have your own interpretation of things. Put all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, ways to submit your own special selection, a link to the Discord server. There's a bunch of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.